All right, basically, we
Uh-huh.
will talk over like the two things which I believe train is most like important to know on both the CT and the T side. And then after I've described and sort of give my explanation for how I think the train is to be played, then we're going to talk over, we're going to watch some demos of two different teams. We're going to watch a demo between Gambit and Furia, and we're going to look at how both teams do exactly what I described, but how they do it in slightly different ways. So this isn't just something that I feel like these two teams do, but it's like basically every single team that I know or that I've watched do these exact same things. So there's two main methods to play and train. On the T side, it's basically rotation control. So it's the controlling of players rotating between positions and then abusing what's weak and what's strong. And then the second thing is basically point of contacts. So we'll start with point of contact. So on train, there's 5 entrances. And what's kind of important for us to understand is that basically means that you can have all 5 players watching one position at all times and always have control of the map. Now, the one advantage that train has for the T side that's different from other maps is even though there's 5 points of contact, if you put heavy pressure towards one point of contact, if the T's don't back it up, you can easily win the exchanges. So, for example, if you're showing heavy contact towards Ivy and they allow that control to be exploited, then obviously you can go backline and obviously you can come out towards site. And in doing so, forces the defense points to be incredibly fucked because if they don't have players around these areas, for example, then those new points of contact become these areas. So instead of having 5 points of contact, now the T's have to deal with multiple areas. And it's the same with main. If you can get yourself out towards Olaf, if you can get yourself out towards E-Box, and you can put heavy pressure towards main, if they don't have players to defend the split points of the points of contact, then and they don't have enough players to back up like all of those additional points of contact which come forward, then they have to deal with multiple new areas. So instead of having to deal with main, they now have to deal with Olaf, they now have to deal with this section right here, they potentially also have to deal with here, they have to deal with here. So they could essentially split this up into 2 lines, but then smokes give you like a more easier exchange on the T side when dealing with points of contact. And then the same is with pop. So obviously with pop, it's a little bit more simple, but if you put heavy pressure towards pop, it forces the players to basically get into positions which they can defend this area from easily. So obviously from back here, you know, if you're trying to defend pop, they can easily take fights with players out towards this way without and force this player to not keep their eye on main or whatever. And the same with this angle, etc., etc. And the same with Ivy. So what's really important for us to understand is how pro teams are using points of contact. So there's something that Keen said a while back for Mirage, and I don't know if we were all here at the time, but he was saying that obviously in Mad Lions they were talking about whenever going A, we always want to try and aim for 3 points of contact. So it's a very similar thing for train.
They didn't talk about that. It's like my theory.
Oh, okay, yeah. So obviously Keen's thing is exactly right. Whenever you want to basically attack a site, you want to try and do it from as many angles as possible. You want to upset the defense as much as possible. You want to pull multiple attention towards multiple positions. If you're all filtering through one spot, they can concentrate all their attacks on that angle. So obviously that's what we want to focus on the T side. So we want to focus on multiple exchanges of points of contact. So we want to try and attack here, here, and here, basically exactly the same time. That way, if they're playing 4 towards the site, which is quite common on train, they have to juggle who's defending what at the right time. And also, if then we apply pressure towards the additional points of contact, if we're also applying pressure towards B, or we flip it around and we're applying pressure towards A, but then we attack B with 2 points of contact, then which you can also make as 3 if you come through this section right here, then if they're playing 2 towards here, they have to justify which angles is more important for them to hold, and they can easily be overwhelmed. So we'll have a look more in detail in that when we watch the pro games, but that's a really, really basic summary of points of contact. Now we're going to talk about rotation control. So as I mentioned, it's quite common that the setup on this map is basically for 1. So what we want to always try and aim for is when we're attacking A, we typically want 3 players towards here And if we're attacking B, we want one play towards here, which obviously always leaves this one float position, which is always in the middle. And this is the player that we want to abuse. So there's 3 potential rotates on this map. So you have the AWPer, who can play usually these 2 positions are his main 2 positions. You have then a rotator, which is typically an AWPer, but it can also potentially be the pop guy. And then you also have the secondary Ivy player, which again is usually the AWPer. So in a lot of cases, the AWPer is typically the guy that we want to be trying to force to rotate. And he's the one we want to be abusing. So obviously there's some little pointers that we can try and like highlight here. And what it is when there's 2 Ivy, we're at the advantage. Because now we know that this potential area here and here is weaker, right? If there's someone towards sandwich, then that typically means that there's someone more up close towards pop, right? And that probably also means that there's maybe someone covering the pop guy, or there's someone holding from connector. So these aren't concrete facts, but these are more generalized. If the opponents are playing here, then typically they play there. And these are like things that we really want to highlight is if they have a guy sandwich, that typically means that they don't have 2 towards Ivy in this case. It's not always true, but it's the most typical outcome, which means that then Ivy might be a weak place to attack. And the same with pop. If they have one guy in pop, then that could usually highlight that someone's defending his main push. So it's either from connector, it could be from here, or it could also be a sandwich guy. So the sandwich guy is making sure that no one comes out here and just blatantly tries to take fights. So again, we can use that to our advantage. That could potentially mean the rotator guy is more up towards pop area. That could mean the pop guy is the rotator guy, and then they might be playing 2 towards Ivy. These are the things that basically we need to look for when we're seeing where are the opponents playing right now and where could be the weakest point. So when we're playing our game, what we want to be really trying to do is concentrating on this rotation control. Now, it's something that you apply in Nuke. I think we spoke about this a little bit before. At one time, I don't know if you were there, MTZ, but basically that was that you want to try and abuse one guy, always forcing one guy to rotate under towards Secret or B. And then that way you can have a much easier time attacking towards the the upper areas. So, for example, ramp, A, and outside. Right. So that's the most simplest explanation for that theory. And I guess we didn't really talk about B, but it's the same thing. So obviously, you're only really going to have your rotator here, or he might be heaven. So it's about finding out if that player is here, which is sometimes a little bit more difficult because it's very hard to get that kind of info, but you can usually find that kind of info from how much utility they're using in these positions. Maybe where the utility is being thrown from. So if they don't throw a smoke the whole game, and then all of a sudden you see, like, let's say the B player, which I believe is MTZ, he sees a smoke that bounces maybe 3 or 4 times up this ramp before it lands. That could indicate that they've thrown it really far back at quite high speed. You know what I mean? And that what that could potentially tell you is they might not be playing like a position like here or here, for example. They could potentially be playing retake B, which would indicate maybe 4 towards A. And the reason why they might be doing that is if we've got heavy pressure towards Ivy, they might want to do that. But if we've put no pressure towards Ivy, no pressure towards main, and then all of a sudden we have indication that they've done this smoke, then instead of indicating that they're playing retake B, that could be the rotator guy coming in, quickly lobbing his smoke, and then going towards heaven. So these are little indications that you all know how to do, you all know how to find, but it's about using the information that's required. So let's have a couple of examples of how we can use rotation control. Now, I think one of the easiest ones to understand is Olaf. So it's become like, it's always been the meta to make sure that Olaf is clear, but as teams are pushing forward into 2021, you see more and more times that the CT side are focusing all of their attention on making sure Olaf's clear the moment you see default smokes. Now, the reason why is Olaf is a really, really good place to get players for rotation control. The reason why is if you've got a guy Olaf, you don't have this point of contact anymore, but you have these points of contact. As I already mentioned, you've got potentially 2 points of contact. You put a smoke here, now you've got potentially more points of contact. So you have here, here, and here. And also they could potentially come through this section right here, which is now walled off, which could make it more difficult for any players holding there. Now, you can technically, with one player, hold all of these points of contact, but it's much more easier to control main than it is to control someone Olaf, which means a lot of teams are focusing most of their attention early round, especially endpoint. We can watch an endpoint demo potentially if I still have it uploaded, where they focus all of their attention on first clear Olaf if they see default smokes, and then they rotate off. towards B or towards Ivy or towards Pop. So how exactly is this working? So as I said, you're using a combination of points of contact and like information denial, where you're getting out towards Olaf and you're trying not to show them, and you're also using it in partnership with potentially default smokes or maybe some form of strat execute smokes, and you're causing them to focus, you're causing the CT side to focus their whole attention on trying to make sure that this is clear before they do any other thing. So obviously, with this information bear in mind, if you see teams basically focusing almost all of their attention towards making sure this area is clear because you took it once, then you can then use that in future rounds. So how many plays are they using? Are they using one guy jumping over sandwich and then coming this way? Are they using their AWP peek in this angle? Is their AWP holding this angle first, checking to make sure no one crosses? Is the guy going pop? Because if he is, then he's a danger from this potential angle. So these are like the things that you need to bear in mind when you're getting like a player out Olaf. You can use Olaf really, really well in combination with controlling rotation. You can do the same with Ivy control. So obviously you have the right side, you have the left side smokes, and you also have the middle. And basically in doing this, you can once again cause rotation control. So if they're playing two players towards here, and you smoke, let's say, the left side, and then you start getting fought from the right side, then you can pretty much be assured that this player might be focusing his attention towards here, and they might not be wanting to rotate a guy at this particular moment. If they're only playing one player towards here, and you're applying heavy pressure towards these with these smokes, or you're just applying heavy pressure in general towards this angle, and then all of a sudden you're not taking any fights, then this could indicate that the opponents have maybe gone more up towards main to control these points of contact, etc., or they're holding more passive backline, which could indicate playing passive towards B, or having their rotate already in connector or backline with this player, you know? So these are like some really little things which we need to bear in mind when we're watching the pro demos, if they're using or not. Pop is also a really good one. This is the biggest reason why CTs always take pop control, because if you have pop as Ts, you can control not only this area really well, but the B holes. If you don't have pop control, it's very, very hard to control B holes as well, because they can gain a lot of info just from hearing things. And they can also push up behind you and obviously get easy info. And that means that as a T side, you always have to be aware that there could potentially be someone pop. So this works on the opposite side, where the CTs are essentially controlling rotation control. By having a guy pop, they don't have to rotate as eagerly. They can almost always control the information that they have. Is there anyone above pop? Have they heard anything towards B holes? Is the B guy seen anything? If not, then he can basically just play with his utility, not really use it very much. So again, another thing that we have to bear in mind, it's something that you all already know, but pop control, when we don't have that as Ts, it's sometimes very difficult to establish rotation control. So those are the two concepts. And now what I want us to do is basically go into pro demos and watch exactly how they're using these two things, and in partnership with either strats, in partnership with defaults, in partnership with whatever, and how not only the Ts are using that, but then how the CTs react to it. So what's really important for us is not to just understand it from the T side perspective, but what happens in the situations as a CT side when we're being rotation controlled, or they're using heavy points of contact. We need to understand this in the moment, and then we need to abuse that the best we can, because essentially what you want to be doing is countering the counter. So they're countering your setup by forcing points of contact and rotation control. You want to understand this is happening, and then you want to hit them back with your counter. So you counter their initial strategy, and then that is how you're playing your game. So let's have a look at how Gambit and Furia do this. So if you have a look on train, first thing that we need to establish before watching this demo is what is the default of Furia. That's probably the most important thing that we need to establish. And in order to do so, we can just skip through the rounds and we can have a look at how they're playing. So obviously here we have just sort of a main peak from art, nothing really special, nothing really indicating a default. Here we have standard smokes. So this could indicate a default. So let's have a look where the players are playing. So we've got a player trying to get out and peek towards pop. We have essentially what is like a 1-2-2 at this current time, and we're using standard smoke. So we can like take this into other rounds and see if they're doing the similar stuff. So once again, we have that standard smoke, but we have B push. That is essentially a default with conditioning built into it. And again, we have the standard smoke. So what it seems like is they might have one standard smoke on their default and just general B pressure. Again, a default with no smokes. heavy pressure towards Ivy, what appears to be a strat. So their default could potentially be a mix of these two smokes with some form of setup, whether it be 1-2-2, 2-2-1, 2-1-2, etc., etc. So now what we want to do is have a look at how they're using points of contact. Now, one thing to bear in mind is Furia are an execute style team, and they do have defaults, but it basically resolves around someone getting an entry, is how their defaults usually work. So we're going to go on the rifle rounds. Let's actually get those first. Rifle rounds, Furia. Where are they? Can anyone see them there? Full buy. Let's have a look. So rifle rounds. So let's look at where they're using points of contact. So obviously they've put pressure towards main. They've used these two smokes. So that means that Olaf is also potentially open. So here's one. Like the first thing you have to bear in mind is Olaf is potentially open. They're putting pressure towards main. They've used these two smokes in conjunction with obviously fighting. We've got a guy going towards B holes and a guy going towards here. So with this setup, we can establish pressure point here, here, and here. And let's see how they do that. So obviously they go into this round. You've already got your pressure point established here by him throwing a molly here. You've got your pressure point attempt on pop by trying to take pop control. And you've also got your pressure point main. So you've got 3 points of contact. And unfortunately for Furia, it just hasn't worked out because they just took too many early peaks. So that was the attempt to trying to get 3 pressure points, but it didn't work. Obviously, round 5, let's have a look again. So again, we've got with this molly simply established. You've already got 1 point of contact established because it's showing the opponents we are potentially here. You need to watch towards here. You've got your next one also being established, which could potentially be pop control. You can't see from this angle now, so you have to peek from this angle. So now you've got point of contact here and here also established. And now, and pop also has not been established, but they're trying to push Nafani out. So obviously, they know they've got 2 points of contact. They've obviously lost main control, so there's one gone. And let's see how Gambit are now responding to this. So they know there's players here. They know there's players here. And because of the way that they threw their utility, they're also indicating that there could potentially also be players back here or also in main. So they've moved everyone who was back here. They were playing what was essentially 4-1 towards A, which was 2 players here, 1 here, 1 here. And what they've done is they've taken main control. They've shifted the 2 Ivy players upwards, and they've now rotated 1 off. What that allows them to do is they can focus less on this point of contact and they can focus more on these 2 points of contact. They know in this round that for Furia, pop is important for them. Why would pop be important for them? Well, they've already established a point of contact here and they've already done it here. So they've taken main from them to eliminate this point of contact, and now they're about to back it up. So they're going to put heavy pressure towards the main and basically this part of the site. And what that does for Gambit is allows them to take their fights more towards these angles, so these 2 points of contact, and forget about this one. They can keep their eye on it, and they can keep their attention glued. However, if they need to, they can fight at these 2 points of contact. So what they've done is they're eliminating one of their points of contact and putting more pressure towards these 2, right? So instead of trying to hold all 3, they're just focusing on 2, which is much easier for them to manage. You know, if you've got less area to manage, and you eliminate one part of the defense, so one part of the attack, so main, then they have to focus more of their attention towards this area or more of their attention towards this area. If they try and take main when you have main control, then you essentially force the Ts to spread more of their pressure across more areas, and they could potentially make more mistakes. So that's the first main thing that we're seeing. So obviously Inters eventually goes back, but he does rotate over towards B. They feel like this point of contact is gone because they have main control. Now this could be the turning point in Gambit's defense. They fucked up here. They don't know. They didn't have any info. They took main and they believed that it was essentially B. But if they would have stayed how they were, they potentially would have won this round. Obviously, round 6. Let's see if we see something else. So we have no point of contact towards.
Can you actually go back and like let the round play out? Like they have pop, they almost have main, and they have Ivy. I want to see how 3 points of contact work here.
Yeah, so they've got these players ready, and Vinny can be ready. After you, there's essentially a rule. Here's your first point of contact. This one's the easiest to take. Here's the second, because this is the second easiest to take, and here's the third. So if you don't have pop, but you have here and here, then what I would suggest for us is quite simple. Drop down pop, as these 2 points get their contact. So essentially, here's where your first fight is, here's where your second fight is, here's where your third fight is. And the reason why we do that is if you obviously try to fight out pop before you've got main control, you put yourself at risk from 2 angles. And if you try to fight out main before you obviously get control here again, you have to fight with this line and you also have to fight with this line. So it's quite easy. This is probably the easiest one to take because you can manage yourself with smokes better and it's easier to clear these angles before. Like that's my general rule of thumb, is how a lot of pro teams do it anyway. So as you can see, they first take main control, and then they have their first contact point, which is starting to attack here. That pulls Shearer's attention this way. He's already lost his main player. And now with this information, Vinny can basically drop at this point. So Vinny drops the exact moment they take main and attack here. And that allows him full pop control. If there was a player who would probably be looking here or would be inside pop looking towards pop, which then allows these players to come out, and then eventually Vinny can then basically chain it for the third player. So after these players take their point of contact here, that's when Vinny peaks. Obviously, it's after the molly, but I don't think he would have peaked before the molly. And then that allows them full control of the site from 3 points of contact. Really, really simple. I think Gambit just made the mistake of over-rotating. They had the best idea. They eliminated focusing so much on this point, and they moved all of their players up this way. And that worked best for them, but then they spread their butter too thin. So they tried to have a player here, and 3 players here, and that didn't work for them. So let's go into round 6 and see if we can see some similarities. So we have, once again, main pressure, nothing here, and we also have pop pressure. So 2 points of contact, and now we're about to see a third point of contact. Yeah? And luckily for Gambit, they either haven't heard this or it doesn't interest them, and they've basically taken what information they have from the earlier exchanges. So losing a player towards the main peak and losing a player here from pop. They've taken this info with nothing happening here yet, and they've essentially gamble stack towards B. Obviously, there's more information that comes into it. They probably knew that this was going to happen, but the reality is Furia tried to get that third point of contact because they already have here and here. They hadn't heard Gambit go into main. They haven't heard Gambit take any form of pop control unless they warp peaked it, and that's the information that they're gambling on. They do some form of execute towards E, and then they instantly attack B. Once that third point of contact has been established, bang, straight out B. Yeah? They already have main. They already have pop under pressure, so they don't need to try and do some fake execute from these 2 angles. They're going to do that from this angle, essentially. And you can see, obviously, Yuri goes all the way out of his way extra to this angle. He could have easily thrown that shit from back here, but it wouldn't have been convincing enough because they already had pressure points in these 2 areas. Yeah, so this is the best area to take that. So we don't see how Gambit react because they basically went for the gamble stack. But as you can see, the moment that smoke lands is essentially the point that Fury go for the execute. Now, best case scenario, they would have only had 1 player here. They might have had a guy here or rotated back, and Gambit really should have had some form of player towards A, whether it be heaven, back bomb, back lanes, or in quad, you know? But obviously, Gambit are next level shit. So, round after that, let's establish those points of contact. So, no shot towards main. Finally, we have some pressure towards here. Don't know if they saw the main guy, so we won't count that. And right now, we've only got 1 point of contact. That has now been eliminated. Yeah? Gambit have just taken that immediately back. So now they have no contact anywhere. They've not shown any of their pressure towards any angles. Obviously, now they're trying to re-establish this point here. Obviously, like, armed with the knowledge that they just took pop control, that could potentially be important for them. Now, what can we use with that? So as you can see, Gambit's got fuck all towards here. So I think they're just going to push all their players up at this point. You know, focus on just these 2. Because if, again, this is the easiest angle and the easiest fights to take as a T, these are the worst. These are what you call the easy choke points. This is potentially also a choke point because it's a tunnel. But it's easier to smoke left side, smoke right side, use flashbangs, use mollies and stuff to get out of this area relatively risk-free. To get out of main, you have to do a lot more bullshit. To get out of pop, you also have to do a lot more bullshit. If you can get to E-box, that's no problem then. You've got different angles that you can fight. You've got different ways you can use the environment to your advantage as a T. But they've essentially pushed Inters up because they've got no pressure point here. And they've got pressure point here, which potentially also means they could have someone main. So they take main control. Nafani's trying to deal with keeping pop control. And as you can see, they've got all of their players in what I call the T courtyard, and this is what I call the CT courtyard. So they're pushing all of their players up in towards what you would call like the danger zone, and they're trying to take the fights at these 2 pressure points and fucking off this one, because they've obviously not established anything here. And obviously Inters is just keeping his eye on it. So this is something that we do anyway. Sometimes you play an AWP here. I've seen Stepper, you do this. You used to do this a lot when you were on the AWP. But this is the exact same thing. So it's about knowing what are the opponents focusing on here? Furia focused immediately on pop control. Could that indicate that they want to go B? Potentially. They've put no pressure here. Gambit didn't see them. I don't think they saw Art, or I think it's Art, right? The AWPer? No, it's Junior, sorry. They didn't see Junior with the AWP, so they don't know if anyone's here, so that could potentially mean free main, you know? So they've pushed everyone up, and again, they're focusing on just fighting 2 points of contact rather than all 3. Fighting all 3, you're spreading the butter too thin. You fight 2, you can take your angles as and where you need them. Let's see how this round plays out. So essentially, they can't get their point of contact in pop. They go for that aggressive peek in main with the AWP. But they've already taken control here, and essentially you've got this player holding back just to make sure that no one comes through this angle. He's also ready to instantly fight main if needed, and he can easily take that exchange. And that basically puts a complete stopper in Furia's attack, because they can't use any of their points of contact. They wanted to come through here, relatively quiet. Didn't work because the players weren't there, and they were holding it from a distance. They wanted to retake main after they lost it. It didn't work because Axel had a good off angle, and he would have also had support from these 2 players. And they wanted to take pop, but Nafani had it. So they couldn't, as T's, do any form of good rotation control because they had no points of contact. They couldn't do any form of rotation control. They haven't put any pressure towards Olaf. They haven't put any pressure, or they haven't put massive pressure towards pop, and they also didn't put pressure towards backline. They also put no pressure towards B. So all 5 points of contact were essentially fucked for Furia right there. And because they got no points of contact, there was 0 rotation control. Gambit would just freely rotate as and when they wanted. But finally, moving on to this round, see if we see a similar thing. So again, no utility being used, 1 single flashbang. This could potentially indicate that they're out Olaf or they went for a main peek. That establishes a point of contact here, no problem. There you go, you've got 1. Now they're going to essentially fight back a little bit here. You've got your point of contact up towards B upper. That's relatively good, but Hobbit's holding that, so it's no problem at all. Now you have a bit of rotation control, so Shira's going to instantly rotate off here and focus towards the B site. And Axel's also going to focus off. Now, the reason why they're doing that is probably because, again, there's no points of contact on Furia towards the A site, so it's relatively easy for Gambit to rotate 2 players off, no problem, thinking that it could be essentially B here.
Can you go back, actually?
Yeah, go on.
They did establish pop. They like mollied down pop. Junior flashed above main, and the main guy peaked, right? So
When?
yeah, watch this. At this point, go back. The main guy maybe didn't peak because of the molly, but like didn't the it's the CT molly in pop,
Yeah, it's
right?
from Nafani, because they don't have pop control, so he mollied into it. Furia just did nothing apart from this 1 B upper as far as control. They had no pressure towards here. Inters is still watching here, but he's got no pressure. They've essentially established pressure main with that 1 flash. That's it, and potentially also Olaf, but that was cleared, I think. Let's have a look. Did they actually clear that? No, they didn't even check Olaf, because I don't think they have any form of fear that Fury is even going there.
And that flash doesn't blind Shiro. Like, that's like a flash above main. So see, Shiro is watching it, and this flash doesn't fully blind him, or maybe it did.
Yeah, it did for some reason.
Maybe it did. Okay, maybe it was deep enough, but
even still,
wasn't convincing.
Like, it's not convincing enough for them. They have essentially all the players in positions to say there's no way anyone got out Olaf here, and they are potentially in main. That's about all they've got. So they've got 1 point of contact up to this point from the Furia side. That is it. That is a weak default in my eyes, because they're not establishing any form of map pressure. They're basically just going against Gambit and hoping that they can get the right stuff off and get the right round wins with no form of map pressure. So as we see here, we finally get a bit of pressure up towards B, and then they technically over rotate. That is your rotation control, but we're on round 8. there's one win from the T side, and you have to sort of imagine, is this an attempt at rotation control, or is this more of just a, oh fuck, I'm just going to try and walk out B? And I think that's what we're seeing from the Fury side, is we're not seeing the attempt at actually controlling the rotate through pressure points, but we're just seeing them trying to look for an entry somewhere. And I think this is what defines a good team and a great team, is that great teams understand how to use their pressure points to establish rotation control. And then also when they're on the CT side, understand when this is happening to them and react to it. And good teams are somewhat good at doing this, and they have a basic understanding of doing this, but they don't know what to do when the pressure mounts. When you're in a situation like this, when you're hard down, then they just try stupid shit to try and get the round wins. This isn't necessarily stupid, but you have to question, they did nothing towards any of these other angles, and then they just instantly attack B, and that is it. Like, yeah, it could work, but they're not doing anything with their default. Obviously, going into the rest of this round, you finally have a bit of pop pressure. They get that kill there. That establishes this point here. As we said earlier, they had main pressure with that one flash technically. So Inter still needs to be aware that they could potentially be also on main. And also, there was no contact here. However, the round before, I don't know if you remember, this guy came out here with no utility. So Inters has to be aware that there is potentially pressure here, because a guy did come out of here with nothing. He threw absolutely nothing. So Inters is now having to be glued. So as you can see, he's taken an angle which allows him to control his angle. He can't be fought from here or here. He can't be fought from here or here. So he can control what he's fighting and how he's fighting. And that allows Gambit to essentially play 3 towards B. So this is really good from Gambit. The over-rotation has worked for them. Moving on to round 11, it's not really worth looking at that. So let's have a look at how they deal with this round. Oh, again, we have what is like an execute here, and they're all essentially coming through one pressure point. Oh, they get the molly off in here, luckily early. They get this back 6 smoke. They get this sandwich smoke, I believe. No, sorry, connector smoke. And Inters, because he hasn't really ever got much pressure from here, he just simply blocks it and focuses all of his attention towards here. They block this angle, and they focus all of their attention towards these potential harmful angles. So they've eliminated 2 contact points, or pressure points, and they're focusing all of their attention on this area right now. Now, it's really fucking good from Gambit. As you can see, they can just keep mollying like all of the pressure points which stem from getting Olaf control. So back 6, sandwich, this point right here, these 3 pressure points are all under pressure right now. As you can see, that molly disappears. Axel focuses a bit of his attention towards here while also hiding from the main peak. And then they can all focus towards these angles, you know? They don't have to worry about here and here right now. Obviously, Inters and Axel are paying attention to it, but it's not their main priority because they're essentially focusing wherever the pressure point is. And as you can see, Fury can't do anything with it. They get that 1 kill. They establish again that they're at this pressure point, but Inters goes into a position where he can hold both of these angles, no problem from this angle alone. And then obviously how the round pans out. So obviously they get to a point where they just literally can't do anything with these pressure points. There's no real pressure pop. There's no real pressure Ivy. It's all main and all on this line right here, and it's eliminated relatively easy. So finally, round 12, we have a win. Let's have a look at how they got that. So with these 2, we establish Olaf pressure. We essentially establish main pressure. Let's have a look at if they do anything Ivy. So we have a molly Ivy. So there's your Ivy pressure. So now we've got 2 pressure points, no problem at all. We got anything towards B. So Vinny comes here. He shoots a couple of bullets. He mollies there. We've potentially got pressure here and now pressure here because the enemy smoked this, which means he's blind. So now we've got 4 pressure points. They eliminate. Now let's see how Gambit reacts to this. So they, at this point, push all 3 of these players up together. And they do sort of like a bit of a main execute. They rotate then a player off towards B as well as getting pop control. And now they push these players up close. You know, they push them up towards these pressure points to essentially fight. And Inters rotates off. And now they're focusing all of their players. You remember CT in the T side courtyard? They're pushing all of their players forward. You know, their rotator, everyone is going forward and they're putting all of their pressure upwards. So they're not on the left side or the right side, they're on the left side, which is much better for them because they can control their angles much easier. You know, if they come out of Ivy, then they can fight with 2 players like this. If they come out of main, they can fight with 2 players like this. If this guy is stuck back here, or he's fighting Ivy, he can't focus his attention towards main. It's not very easy. And also, they have a rotator in positions that's able to instantly go between the 2 sites, no problems at all. Now, how do Furia win this? They have pressure all over. They have pressure here, here. They've lost their pressure here, but they also have it in these 2 positions, and that causes massive over-rotation from Gambit, and then they essentially just walk out B. Yeah? It's fairly simple from them. This is really good with these 2 smokes as well. We have more confusion added into the mix. So it's a mixture between rotation control, pressure points, and a little bit of strategy built in. And there you go. You've basically got a free site B, no problems at all. And you can see how this round is an easy win for them with massive pressure all over the map. Whereas the other rounds where they essentially have no pressure, Gambit exploit the living shit out of them. So round 13. Again, let's have a look at our pressure points. Let's have a look at our rotation control. We have main established already. Do we have Ivy? Nothing Ivy, but Inters is obviously just blocking it anyway. And then, again, we don't really have B. Now, I'm not saying, right, stuff like this is quite intelligent, by the way, just walking. I'm not always saying we need to apply huge pressure everywhere and stuff, but built into our default, as you can see, the rounds which are most successful, especially in these pro teams, are usually the rounds that they're either controlling their pressure points on the CT side really well and then managing their rotations, or they're on the T side, they're having heavy pressure all over the place and are making quick, decisive decisions with that pressure, you know? That's usually the rounds which win the best. Now, obviously, you have rounds like this where this could potentially work really, really well. So obviously, we can see they just walk into B, get that kill, but Shiro's already on the rotation. So why is Shiro on the rotation already? And let's have a look at why they might play 2B in this situation. So they establish their main pressure. Axel pushes through to eliminate this potential that this player is in these 2 locations. And Nafani also is about to focus his attention towards there. He gets his Molotov in here. Now him and Axel can focus on eliminating this pressure point that's just been established. Once that's eliminated, there you go. Olaf's clear. This player is dead. Now we can get the rotation back. So they can control their rotation again and get Shiro off back towards the B site. And that essentially wins them this round. So they lose their pressure, they regain it back. It's as simple as that. You know, there's nothing complicated about this at all. It's just about making the right decisions is the hardest part. The decision making is always the more difficult part. And because Shiro got that rotation off, he can get this easy push. This smoke failed because he was going to smoke connector. And then it's a round win for Gambit, essentially. They've got their rotations in the right place. They've got everything sorted. Obviously, we can look at how the round plays out. There's nothing that Furia can do. But Furia had the pressure, but they lost it. And then they didn't regain it, and they had to make a quick decision, but Gambit were already ready for that quick decision. So let's have a look at these pressure points again. Here we go. We've got one quick here. We've also potentially got one here, especially with this main kill, but they've regained pop control. So now how did Gambit react? So Hobbit pushes B. He was, I think, pushing B anyway, but now he's in a really good position to continue that B push. No problems at all because they've lost pressure here. They've lost pressure here. Nafani's now stuck with control of one position, and now these 2 players are completely separated as well as this player. This is a horrific for Gambit. They can't control any of their pressure points. They can't rotate well. There's nothing that really they can do here. And then Gambit are essentially forced to try and regroup or make tough decisions. Nafani comes out of pop and leaves it and focuses his attention towards main. Shiro and Inters are trying to group up. So they managed the situation relatively well, but as you can see, they're just overwhelmed. You know, when you're getting attacked...
The B player pushed.
Yeah, the Hobbit, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's well played.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Luckily, he was already in the push anyway. You know, he was already deciding that he wanted to push, but he continued with that push, which is really, really well played from Hobbit because they lost pressure here, they lost pressure here, they only had it here. They had to do something to equal out the playing field. Shiro can't do anything particular. Inters can't do anything particular. The only thing that can really happen here is one of these 2 players making a play that can really relieve this pressure. And that is essentially what happens. Hobbit pushes, really well played from him. He was already in the push anyway. And Nafani leaves pop completely open and focuses attention towards main. As we mentioned, it essentially goes 1, 2, 3. This is one of the most important positions. This is probably the second most important, and this is the third most important to control. So as The CT, he decided that he's going to focus his attention on making sure main is somewhat covered, and that's where he focuses it, and then Hobbit can obviously focus then towards pop. As you can see, the absolute monstrosity of 3 pressure points towards A just overwhelms the living crap out of Gambit. And if Hobbit wouldn't have pushed there, Inters was dead, Shiro was dead, Nafani was dead instantly. With these 3 pressure points, it was gone. They couldn't do anything, and that is essentially an easy round win for Furia. They use speed and agility with pressure to easily take and overwhelm the site. So something that they hadn't done before was use speed, but they'd always use pressure, and essentially that's how they won that round. So again, let's have a look. Well, we got main pressure, but they're fighting back, so we can almost eliminate this one. Right now, we've now got Ivy pressure, and we've also got pop pressure. We've got no pressure towards B. Oh no, we do. This one flash essentially puts pressure towards here, potentially also pressure upper, because this smoke, again, quite a weird smoke from Hobbit if he's not going to use it well. Obviously, he does try to use it, but now he's having to be aware of that. And now, as you can see, pressure in all 5 areas. Now, how does Gambit react to this reality? So, obviously, they're in a relatively decent setup anyway, but as you can see, they're trying to push their players forward to eliminate this, to not focus so much on these, but these 2 angles, what they decided is more important to them. Shiro rotates around so he can focus on here, and these 3 players can focus their attention forward, and Hobbit can basically just hold B as is. And that allows them to get these 2 easy kills here. As you can see, they broke like my general rule of you come out of Ivy pop last in most situations. Obviously, they've decided to go out first, and they can't get any refrag from main, they can't get any refrag from Ivy. And that allows Gambit, as you can see, again, we've got all of their players on this side of the courtyard. It keeps happening. It's like a reoccurring thing that, oh shit, they're in these 3 locations, potentially also B. Everyone forward right now. Everyone, get the fuck forward. We control these 2 areas are more important to us than this area. If they get backline, sure, we can at least rotate a guy through here. You know? It's not a problem for them. But if they have in pressure in all 3 of these places, then it's pretty much guaranteed it's going to be an A. If they want to go B after they have pressure in all 3 of these places, it's going to take them 10 to 15 seconds before they get everyone there. So you can at least take those fights on B, not much of a problem. So that's what Gambit have decided is important to them, is pushing all of their guys forward. And that is essentially that from Gambit and Furia. As you can see, Furia had a couple of good rounds where they had used heavy pressure, and they controlled where the rotations were going. Otherwise, Gambit were always fighting back. Every time they lost pressure, they regained it. Every time they felt like a rotate would be dangerous, they made sure that they had the pressure back to get the right rotate off. And if we have a look at, we will have a quick look at the Furia side, but it's relatively short. The endpoint demo isn't here, but I can essentially show that in a bit. If we now we want to look at basically the Gambit side or the full buys. So round 18, let's have a look at how Gambit used pressure points. So obviously, here you go, you got your first one. This puts Olaf control, right? So here's your first pressure point, no pressure towards anywhere else. And then we're straight into a B exec. So this didn't work out relatively well for them because Junior's instantly ready for the B. K-Serato, make sure that there's no one Olaf. Art's obviously holding this angle. They smoke off here. So they eliminate this point of contact. They're not too worried about here because nothing's happened yet. And they've checked Olaf to make sure that no one's quickly there. Once that's established, this point of pressure has been relieved. These 2 are completely eliminated right now. Instantly, Junior's on the B rotate. K-Serato checks it. Clear. Junior instantly rotates towards B. And that allows them to instantly win this round by having the rotate in the right position. Essentially. Obviously, it could have gone much more deeper, and Gambit could have played around a bit with B before maybe taking pop control and then maybe rotating a guy back around. But in this scenario, they won because they quickly established that they lost pressure here. They regained it by checking, make sure no one was there, and then they instantly got their rotate off. Good rotation control from Furia, poor rotation management from Gambit. Let's have a look at how this round plays off. So essentially, they're in a position where they have to make a tough choice. They try to take the primary zone. They try to basically control the situation by controlling the rotates. They almost succeed, but I think the failure point comes in just I don't really know. Axel really should have been with a team there. They could have easily held B site, no problem. It was essentially a 2v3, and they had really good oil control. They could have easily got the bomb off here. I mean, they did go around to A, but Art basically won the round here by pushing and got what do you call it? Got this player to have to focus towards here and separate from this player. Yeah, Fury could have easily won. Gambit could have easily won that round, but I feel like the poor rotation management is essentially what won Fury at that. So again, into this round, we have an AWP shot here. Is that an AWP shot from Shiro? It is an AWP shot. So we have main pressure. They've got an AWP main. We've got Ivy pressure. They've thrown a Molotov towards Ivy. And they've taken pop control. So what the Gambit really focus on here, they focus on getting back pop control. They know they haven't retaken main. They know they probably haven't taken Ivy because Axel's holding it. So they're trying to get those 3 pressure points. They've also taken a hit B. So they've also established at least this one. Junior's obviously got towards the upper angle. So how do Furia react to potentially having 3 points of contact? They're obviously trying to hold pop. They lose that. Now they've got fucking pressure point all over the place. You know, the pressure here, here, and here now. The Queserator has been put in an absolute shitfest of a position. They've over-rotated towards B, and now Gambit fully control everything. So they've got control of the whole situation. They've had to push B because they've lost pressure in these 3 locations. They have to push B because they can't do anything towards A to get these pressure points back. Queserator also pushes pop to make sure that he at least has 1 pressure point, and then that is essentially the best that Fury can do with their situation. And then that allows Gambit to come out here knowing that they have pressure here, so there might even be a player watching towards here or even backline, and they can all just filter out of main and also towards pop. Really, really easy from Gambit. They had great pressure points, great rotation management, easy for them. And that's just an easy round win. And then finally we have the last round. So we've established our pressure here. Has Hobbit established anything? So they've obviously mollied this section. They've peeked to make sure no one's there. So we can, in theory, call this your pressure towards B. They're pressuring pop. Oh, they haven't taken it. Yeah. Have they done anything towards main? No, they haven't. So we've got 3 points of pressure. Potentially 4. If Vinny isn't here...
Mollied into main.
Yeah. Oh, he did? Who?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Here's your 4th now. So they can technically imagine that they also have pop. If you have a look, Nafani mollies it and nades it. You know, this could potentially, if the CTs aren't in there or they weren't here, they've potentially also established control here. You know, even though they haven't taken it, there's that potential still there. So now we can essentially say that there's 5 points. Now, what the fuck do Fury do? Knowing that they've obviously got this under control, no problem. This could indicate obviously a B exec to them, because it's quite typical that when you go B, you molly and nade this, right? That's quite typical. That's a normal thing. That's one of the reasons they might have over-rotated here. But now that they've reapplied this pressure towards here, Art's having a re-rotate, and they're now having a question. You know, they look at all the angles they're holding. These 2 guys are controlling both here, and they're kind of focused towards here. Vinny's stuck in pop alone. It's poor pressure point management. At this point, Gambit probably would have fucked everyone off towards this. You know, this is the difference between a good team and a great team. Just, you're not seeing that from Fury. You're not seeing that, oh shit, we've lost pressure everywhere. Obviously, they regained this section here with the pop flash. That is pretty good. They've got that pressure back, but they still have it main. They still have it towards B. They didn't do anything here. So there's still 3 pressure points that aren't under control yet. And what can Gambit do? They essentially know that this pop flash came in. They start attacking main, because that could indicate there's definitely 1 or 2 players towards this section potentially. And then they can just fight between all these different angles. So Axel walks his way out. Inters and stuff get control of Art here. Or get control of this location right here. And then it's fighting on all fronts. Vinny has to choose, do I hold here or do I now fight main? He chooses to fight main. Hobbit drops down, gets the instant kill. And there you go, 3 points of pressure, fighting at every angle. They cannot physically hold this site. Queserator is jammed between a rock and a hard place, and he's just stuck to fucking fight in a stupid position. This is an absolutely horrific position to be in, but he was forced into that position because of the points of pressure. And that is essentially how Gambit have won this game, is on the CT side, they were absolutely fantastic at managing their pressure points. Whenever they lost them, they gained them back. Or whenever they lost them, they managed them well. So if they lost all 3, then they picked and chose which ones were more important to them. I think for Gambit, this part, or these two right here, are more important to them, so they try to put all of their players into this section right here. For Furia, Ivy seemed quite important to them, so when they lost pressure here and here, they took Ivy back, you know? So it's picking and choosing as a team what is more important to us. But and it was the same with the B side. So obviously when these two positions were lost, they didn't necessarily do anything to gain them back, but there was that one round where they lost all 5 positions, Gambit. They lost all 5 positions, and then Hobbit pushed, you know? Obviously, he was already in the push, but that was a conscious decision to carry on with the push. He could have instantly U-turned and gone back and played passive, but he chose to do that push. And I think this is, again, it's that pressure control. Like, what have we lost? Where don't we have pressure? Where can we gain it back? We can't necessarily gain it back from here. We can't gain it back from here. We can't gain it back from here. So maybe we gain it back from these 2 locations, you know, and vice versa. It's just figuring out as the CT side where your pressure's been lost, where the opponents are applying pressure, how are they potentially controlling your rotates, and where are they about to go? There isn't really much more to that. Obviously, putting it into practice is much more difficult than me just sitting here and calling out theory. But I hope you understand from watching this one demo that Gambit have everything under control almost at all times. The rounds which go unwell for them is when they lose too much control too quick and Furia overwhelm them, you know? That is the only rounds that they lost, is when too much pressure was all at once and they didn't know what to do. And this is essentially what we can use going forward, is how on the defaults, how on the strats do we manage our pressure, and then how does that affect the opponents on how they rotate, and then how do we use that to our advantage? If you can see that applying pressure towards this section forces their connector guy to potentially rotate over to here, or if you play pressure towards here and Olaf, for example, and that forces their Ivy guy to come more up, or it forces them to try and take pop control more, that's rotation control. So then you can use the pressure in those specific areas to control that part of the rotation. You know, you can see, oh, when we put main pressure, they play pop, or they want to always make sure they have pop control, and they always potentially also play a guy sandwich, which potentially means that they only really play one guy towards B. Therefore, main pressure equals B execute, you know, and it's about seeing those things and not just waiting on your in-game leader to give you all the info, but assisting that. So telling your in-game leader, okay, when I apply pressure here, or I saw last round that you guys put pressure main and it took this guy off my angle. You know, it's about communicating with your in-game leader and giving him the information which allows him to make the right decisions. When we play default, often what happens on this map is we don't really apply much pressure, but we're waiting for a call to come in from Keen instead of actively looking for, how do I give Keen info, and how can he then use that info? We're always kind of waiting for Keen to make every decision off no info. You know, we have to give our in-game leader info from time to time and assist in that process. And the same with the CT side. When we're on the CT side and we're holding here and we're holding here, and we've got a guy in pop and we also have a guy sandwich, and we're separated on all these 4 accounts, and then they put pressure main, or they put pressure Ivy, or they put pressure pop, or even towards the B-hole areas, then we need to ask ourselves in these positions, you know, is it important that I hold Ivy right now? Might it be better if I come up front and we manage main and pop? Is it important that I hold pop? Would it be best if we take main control right now? Or we eliminate main, and that way if they want to come out of pop, they have a more harder time doing so. Is it good that we have both main and pop at the same time? Probably not. It might be best to just have pop control, you know? And these are the things that you need to ask yourself in your position, and you need to speak with your in-game leader about. And that is essentially the theory. There is nothing else to it. It's relatively simple, but it's hard to do. The execution is very difficult. The understanding is very easy. I hope, essentially, shouldn't really be anything that you've learned, but it should more be an eye-opener to, you know, these are things that I already knew, but I've not necessarily paid much attention to. Like, that is essentially what this is. And that's where we're going to end that. I'm going to stop streaming now, so